Welcome to our January 24th edition, snowy at best, here in West Lafayette edition of Gold and Black Live. We're great to be joined by Bobby Riddell, a guy that needs no introduction to not only Tippecanoe County folks, but Purdue basketball fans as the voice of, or the color analyst, I should say, on Purdue men's basketball's radio broadcast, and also toiled with the Boilermakers from 2006 to 2009. Quite a story as his days as a Boilermaker guard. And we'll start with a big challenge tonight, certainly for Purdue, as Purdue takes on Michigan. The Wolverines have probably transformed that roster faster than anybody this year under the first-year head coach Dusty May. Several transfers. Roddy Gale, two great inside players. Really going to be a unique challenge, I would think, tonight for Purdue as they take on the Wolverines.
I would agree. This Michigan team, certainly from a talent standpoint, has a lot of it. It's remarkable, certainly, what they've done here this first year under Coach Dusty May. He obviously has some, pretty good coaching pedigree as far as what he was able to do at Florida Atlantic and that run they made a couple years ago to the Final Four. So he clearly is a good basketball coach, but for him to be able to kind of compile this roster and, he was able to bring Vlad Golden, one of those big guys you mentioned, the center, was able to bring him along with him from Florida Atlantic. He's been, I knew him as kind of being like a solid, really good role player at Florida Atlantic. They had a bunch of good guards, Elijah Martin, Janelle Davis, when they were at Florida Atlantic, that got more of the publicity, at least from a scoring standpoint. And I thought Vlad was kind of more of that like super solid role player, rebound, screen setter, catch a lob here or there. And he's dropping 30 balls in the Big Ten multiple times, which is extremely impressive. I didn't know he had that level of offensive game. Maybe it just increased opportunity or maybe he's made a big improvement. But either way, he's definitely excelling in more ways than just being a role player. But he also, of course, does all those other little things, too, as far as protecting the paint and rebounding. But then you combine that with Danny Wolf, the power forward, 7-footer, the transfer from Yale, and his ability to handle the rock at his size, pass, can step out and shoot threes, facilitate. It's been pretty, fun to watch that kind of tandem in the front court. They've done a lot of that big-on-big ball screen action with Danny Wolf being the ball handler and Vlad Golden setting those screens and diving and just putting a lot of pressure on the opposing teams because, most teams from a defensive standpoint don't have both of their bigs in ball screen action simultaneously. You rarely see that. So that's definitely been a unique wrinkle that they've been able to put onto teams. Purdue, at least, fortunately, has been able to see a lot of film from a number of different teams and how they defend that. And, Purdue does have a pretty versatile front court, at least how they start games with Caleb Furst and Trey Kaufman-Renn, two guys similar size, both move their feet pretty well. So I'll be interested to see it shoot around later today, just kind of how Purdue is going to be scheming that up defensively. But, obviously like switching it would be an option just because they're both, pretty equal size and have the ability to move their feet. But it'll be interesting to see what Purdue strategy is because, like you said, they also have Roddy Gale, Trey Donaldson, and some other talented guards that can get buckets. And, it's a good group of some youth and some experience for Michigan. They've lost some heartbreakers in non-conference play, but just one loss so far in conference play. And this is a huge game, right? When you think about trying to win a Big Ten championship, you really don't want to lose any home games. We, of course, saw Purdue drop that game against Ohio State earlier this week. And, you really don't want to lose home games in a row, especially against another contender. I suppose that would be the silver lining with the Ohio State losses. At least it didn't come against a fellow contender, whereas, tonight's game against the Wolverines is against, a fellow contender and one you can ill afford to drop.
Yeah, Purdue a slight favorite, though. I always wonder just where they get that. Just because Michigan really has been impressive. I mean, they go out in the West Coast and they've played well on the road, though they certainly a surprise loss at Minnesota. But that is the definition of the Big Ten. I mean, too, is that you just don't know what's going to happen week game in and game out. But this is a team. I can only think about how good Yale, who we saw earlier in the year, was pretty salty and gave Purdue all it could handle in a lot of ways. Would be with having Danny Wolf in that lineup. But talk about that need too for Caleb Furst and Trey Kaufman-Renn to stay on the court. Kaufman-Renn's occasionally had some foul difficulties. Braden Smith's foul difficulties at Ohio State really, in the end, probably cost Purdue a great deal, and that game certainly cost him a lot of the rhythm in that loss on Tuesday against Ohio State. But talk about that need to be able to keep your guys on the court as much as possible. One would think that would be key for Purdue tonight.
For sure. You would think some foul trouble in the front court could be huge for both sides. Obviously, if either of those Michigan bigs got in foul trouble, that would be great from a Purdue standpoint. But also really quick with the Danny Wolf at Yale thing, they upset Auburn in the NCAA tournament last year.
Right. And
we've seen Auburn, they don't have the exact same team, of course, this year as they did last year, but Janai Broome was there. And man, to think that, Danny Wolf and Yale were able to beat Auburn in the tournament just kind of shows how talented Danny Wolf is and what Yale had last year. But no doubt, the foul trouble is going to be key. Caleb First, definitely Purdue's best interior defender. His versatility, his ability to guard on the perimeter, switch four ways, really guard five positions is huge. And they're definitely going to want him on the floor as much as possible, certainly from a defensive standpoint. Trey, with how, our leading scorer, how effective he is offensively, that was a positive, even though we lost that game the other night. It was a nice positive to see late in that game when we absolutely had to have buckets to try to stay in it. Trey scored 3 baskets in a row, was extremely effective, and, kind of showed that he can handle the spotlight in a late game situation, because that could, be pivotal for Purdue later on down the road. So, really going to be interesting to see who can avoid foul trouble tonight, because Trey is, of course, going to try to put a lot of pressure on those bigs. I don't know if it's going to be necessarily a ton of back to the basket stuff. I'd be interesting to see how they match up. Will they put Golden? I would think from maybe an interior defensive standpoint, they would probably put Golden on Kaufman-Wren, try to limit some of those Kaufman-Wren post touches and have Wolf guard Caleb. But we'll have to see what they do, because, Trey backing down Golden and going to work, he's talented enough he can do it, but I'm not sure the efficiency is going to be great from that standpoint, because Vlad Golden's just got, elite size compared to Trey. But that's where Purdue can then mix it up, and they can go with that ball screen action between Braden and Trey, get Trey on the move a little bit more, hit those pocket passes where Trey's in the middle of the lane. And now you're playing 4-on-3 advantage basketball, and Trey's so good shooting those little floaters or spraying it out. That's probably an area where Purdue can definitely exploit the Michigan defense.
Yeah, and you look also at the playing in the friendly confines, of course, for Purdue on Tuesday. It didn't work out. Again, that's kind of life in the Big Ten. And schedule is everything. Rest is everything. It seems like, of course, you had to experience it as well. You didn't run up and down the court, but even making your way back from the West Coast. But what that was like for Purdue to have to come and jump back into the fray, within 72 hours of being out west, and then coming back 72 hours after a tough loss to Ohio State to be ready against Michigan. Scheduling is everything in the Big Ten right now, just because of the way that this 18-team league is put together. I know Matt Painter doesn't make excuses. I know Bob Riddell doesn't make excuses, but it is a factor. Purdue's got to be in the right frame of mind, one would think, tonight to get a chance to have the upper hand.
Absolutely. Hopefully Matt Urino, like you said, can certainly give Purdue a boost. Of course, it gave us a good boost the other night for the first half, and then just that 17-2 run, right, to start the second half just kind of changed that whole game. It was probably over the course of 5 minutes or so, and it's basketball's a game of runs, and Ohio State was able to build some momentum with that big run to start the second half, and Purdue was just a little bit out of kilter. Like you said, with Braden Smith, you wonder if maybe the foul trouble in the first half and not being able to play as much as he normally does, maybe had him out of sync to start the second half. Because if I recall those, kind of first 5 minutes of the second half, Braden was not on the top of his game. And obviously, hurt us from that standpoint, just because he's usually so dynamite, every game. But that's the thing with tonight. I think, the travel, quick turnaround, you hope that, human nature is real, obviously, as we know, and maybe coming off a loss against Ohio State is that kind of refocusing that this team needs to maybe bring the energy up a notch here tonight. Because I think you could definitely state that during that course of that second half, it felt like Ohio State was the more desperate team, was playing with more energy. And so hopefully now that we've been back home for a little bit, and we have a loss that we're coming off of, this team can play with some increased urgency.
Yeah, when you've had a chance yourself to play for Matt Painter for 4 years, his first 4 years as a head coach, you saw the highs and lows. Your freshman year, you won 9 games. One of your best games was against Michigan, and that upset of the 22nd.
One of our 3 Big Ten wins that year.
That's right. Marcus Green's still making threes in that game, right?
Yes,
so we're going to have a little feature on the site today about some of the best games against Michigan. That one certainly ranks. But just about the evolution of Matt Painter and this program. And it was good when you got here. Because Gene Cady, 25 years prior to Matt Painter. But this is the time too when coaches and experience and keeping things kind of in an even keel after a 7-game winning streak is extremely important. And obviously Matt Painter and company know how to do that. But talk about how that has evolved now that you get to see it from a different angle, from a radio analyst angle, and also being a shoot around and being ready to prep for tonight's broadcast. But just how much things have continued to evolve under Matt Painter has been a storyline, certainly.
Sure, yeah, it's really neat. It's to think about. Rob Blackman and I talk about this all the time, because his first year with the broadcast team was my freshman year, which was Coach Painter's first year as head coach. So we've both been fortunate, to be there at the beginning, and now we're seeing, of course, up close in person, where things have gone under Coach Painter, who's in his 19th, 20th year, something like that now at Purdue. Which
20,
is just,
right? Yeah.
20th year, which is incredible to think. He's been there that long. I mean, 4th all time in Big Ten wins.
It's hard to believe.
It's insane to think about. I mean, especially considering that team my freshman year, as you talked about, where this little walk-on from Lafayette was forced into a role he probably wasn't ready for yet due to just the nature of that team. We had a lot of injuries that year and things of that nature. So, yeah, coaches, he's evolved. It's been really cool to see, certainly even like just the style of play from offensive and defensive schematics have changed from when I played to where he is now. He's certainly changed his system throughout the years. A lot of the core principles are still there, which is cool. A lot of the terminology is still the same, certainly from a defensive standpoint, but there's even been tweaks from a defensive schematic standpoint and offense, especially with a guy like Coach Paul Lusk, assistant, who was an assistant coach for me. And now it's really neat because he's also back as an assistant now. And there's just been a cool transformation and evolution by Coach Painter. I think he's obviously in the prime of his career. And, for like you talked about, you go on a 7-game win streak and then you drop a game. I think Coach Painter he likes these. He doesn't want to lose a game, but I think he likes these situations to get a chance to kind of have his team, come down a little bit, refocus them. And, that's a situation I think he thrives under. So I think we're going to see Purdue at his best tonight.
All right, Mackey Arena, obviously Hammer Down Cancer Night too as well. A very important event too that we'll have Dr. Andy Mesecar in segment 3 talking about that. But it's the most unique places. And when you started your freshman year, it still was a special. The crowds just were getting back to where they should be pretty much from your sophomore year on. It's been a very, very not only tickets have been hard to come by, but also it is one of the premier places in college basketball. You've been to a lot of them. Just talk about that and how Mackey is one of the toughest places to play, but also one of the best environments, and something Purdue will need tonight, I think, from a mental standpoint to maybe get it over the hump.
I think you're right. I think we definitely need Mackey crowd to be special tonight. And to your point, it's pretty much special and a sold out crowd every time, which, dating back to when I played, we definitely had really good crowds. There's no doubt about it. But I remember even for some, like Big Ten crowds were always really good, especially the really big games. But like just thinking back to some of like maybe the pre-conference games, some of those games over Christmas break, we'd have the whole lower bowl filled for sure, but the upper bowl would be maybe a little bit more sporadic as far as the attendance goes. And now every single game Purdue plays, it is pretty much filled to the brim within Mackey Arena. And Mackey's definitely got to be certainly the Big Ten. I think it's the best environment. I haven't been to Duke or Kansas or some of these other places that are highly regarded as well, but To think that Purdue wouldn't be a top 5 environment in college basketball now, I think would be silly to say, because you just think about all the winning that we do, and certainly a lot of that is talent based, of course, but I think the environment does play a huge part. You always hear all these quotes from different individuals who come into Mackey and they say they can't hear themselves think. And Purdue sometimes even gets hurt by it because they can't communicate defensively because the crowd's so loud. But yeah, it's a special place. I've loved it ever since, I was a kid going to games there, and now getting a chance to, sit courtside and call the games to watch these Purdue teams play is definitely a treat.
One of the things you mentioned, which is interesting, Matt Painter's talked about the team, and you're around this team on the court, off the court, certainly on the road especially, but communication. And this is a team that's not, at least Painter's talked about how it is not one that is extremely vocal. I think they're a group of great guys. I think everybody realizes that, and that they're really good, not only student athletes, but great people. But that communication, that part of it, you can't be quiet in this environment. How much do you see of that being as a factor? And is this something that you're seeing is improving as this season has gone on?
I do think it's improving. It was certainly, I think, a piece of the puzzle early that was not as good as it needed to be, but I do think it has improved. And I actually think Caleb first, I got to give him credit. He's not someone who's a really vocal guy by nature, I don't think. But I think when you're a senior, you inherently feel that obligation. I know I felt that as a senior, you feel like you have to have more of a vocal responsibility. But this is something I felt too. It's tough when you're not playing a ton to feel like you are empowered as much to be as vocal as you need to be, just because, you just feel like, man, if I was a bigger piece of the puzzle, then maybe guys would, hear my voice more and consider it more. And I think with Caleb, maybe that was something where early in the season, he's coming off a year he didn't play a ton, backing up Zach Edey. And at the start of this year, the minutes were pretty inconsistent. But I've noticed with him, since he's been in sort of the starting lineup and he's playing more, I've just noticed even on the court, times where he'll hey guys, let's huddle up, and he'll gather the team together and some words of encouragement. And I think from even just talking on the court defensively, I feel like I've seen his speaking improve and increase from that standpoint, from communication standpoint defensively. So I think he's been empowered as that senior leader with his increased playing time. And I think that's been really cool to see. And I think the team's needed it. And I think some other guys have kind of fed off that and rallied around it as well. Fletcher is definitely a guy who's probably one of the other more vocal leaders on the team, just from my seeing how the team works in and out on some of these trips and stuff. So, and then Braden, of course, as the point guard, is vocal as well. But I think Caleb and his maturity as a guy who's playing more as a senior and kind of stepping into that role has helped for sure.
Yeah. All right. You can catch up with Bob's work and a really good story by Tim Newton written recently. We'll put a link to that as well to give you all of what, you got to balance a day job and you made some tough choices because of your broadcast role and family situation, et cetera. And now working in the Purdue Research Foundation. Talk about that as you've continued to, from a professional standpoint, being part of this basketball team, but also your life outside of basketball.
Sure, that's definitely been an interesting transformation, and I appreciated Tim putting that story out about me. That was neat to do, and got to do a little photo shoot outside Mackey Arena, which was pretty
Very cool.
Yep, that was fun, and yeah, it's been interesting. I was doing preparing tax returns and working in kind of the public accounting space as a CPA here locally, and I enjoyed doing that. Was fortunate enough to kind of have Coach Painter and some other guys on the staff as clients, and that partially was probably how the radio gig kind of came about, because I was still, talking with those guys year in, year out and having those relationships with them through that role. But once that radio position did become available, tax season is, right during basketball season. They pretty much go hand in hand. And so, just from a work-life balance standpoint and the cool opportunity to be a part of the radio team, it just from an hour standpoint, I have 4 children now. At the time I had 3, and you're trying to be a dad and then, be involved in maybe some of their sports as they're getting older. trying to be a good husband, and then obviously
Yeah.
trying to do a good job at work, and the tax position, was something that I tried to take, very seriously. And the hours that are required for that role during that time of year is a lot. And then if you're trying to travel with the team and be the radio guy, it wasn't all gonna gel, unfortunately, from that position I had. So I'm grateful that Purdue Research Foundation had an accounting position open at the time, and I was able to pivot, because kind of that more traditional 8 to 5 work schedule was going to be better for me from being a husband, dad, and being the radio guy. So that part's worked great. And then the flexibility I have at Purdue Research Foundation has also been wonderful. I'm able to just work from the hotel, from a remote standpoint, when we go to these different places and things of that nature. So that way my wife's not going to kill me if I use all of my vacation days on Purdue basketball trips. So
Yeah.
It works out well.
All right, let's see. He does the radio analyst. Like I said, your day job. You get people call you on game day, and you do an interview. That we appreciate that so much. Taking the time. One of the class acts, and one of the folks that makes Purdue basketball special, Bob Riddell. Your story is a great one, and you can listen to his work on the Purdue Radio Network tonight as Purdue takes on Michigan. You guys do a great job of providing a lot of, especially in the road games when I get to listen to you a little bit more. You and Rob give that right mix. You even have times to give constructive criticisms to Braden Smith. I heard something a couple days ago that I thought was well said, true, and makes for good radio and a lot of fun to listen to. So enjoy the game tonight, and we'll look forward to what could be a very special night in Mackey Arena. Thanks so much again for your time, Bob.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, hopefully it's a great night in Mackey for all the Boilermakers, and I appreciate you having me on. It's good chatting. Always fun talking ball.
All right. I want to thank State Farm agent Trent Johnson at trentismyagent.com and XXX on the hill, but on the level of Purdue tradition since 1929. We will be back in a couple minutes and be joined by Kevin Sullivan, a former Purdue graduate, media analyst, going to kind of look at the big picture of college athletics and media. We'll have fun doing that. Then, of course, Andy Mesecar from the Purdue Cancer Institute. Hammer Down Cancer Night in Mackey Arena tonight. We'll look forward to that. All right, Bob, thanks again. And we will all be listening to you tonight, especially on that post game as you do that scintillating interview with Matt Painter. That's always a good thing, especially on the road. I know how much you have to hustle to get that done.
Thanks, Alan. Yeah, road games, definitely always interesting to try to get down to the locker room and chat with Coach Painter. Yeah, I'll never forget my first ever interview with Coach Painter post game was the Ron Harper Jr. half court shot.
Yeah,
that was definitely one I was nervous for, but have had the chance to do more over the years, so a little bit more comfortable doing it. But yeah, it's always an interesting experience.
Matt Painter's a good guy to work with too. He makes things pretty good. All right, stay tuned. We'll be back in a couple of minutes on Gold and Black Live.